This is Austin Real Estate Investing.
Austin Real Estate Investing.
We'll be discussing real estate investing in Austin, Texas, and bringing you experts from all different sectors of the real estate game. Your host, Jordan Moorhead, is a real estate agent and investor in Austin and is here to help you get started or to build your portfolio and explore new strategies.
All right, this is the Austin Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is Jordan Moorhead. Today I have another awesome guest for you. We got Landan Dory here. He is a RV and mobile home park broker here in the Austin, Texas area. They do a lot of really cool deals, and he's going to tell us about all of what they're up to and some of the deals they've recently sold. Hey, Landan, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Jordan. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming. I know we were struggling to get this on the map here or on the schedule, but we're both busy guys, and we figured it out, so...
Yeah, I think I underestimated how busy I was going to be starting a company.
Yeah.
But so far, my head's above water, at least today. Tomorrow might be a different story.
It's always something going on, always something on fire.
Constantly.
In the business. Yeah. I know how it is. So, Landon, before we get too far into things, really important question for you. What is your favorite restaurant in Austin?
Oh, well, as you know, there's so many good options. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but gun to my head today, my number one go-to is going to have to be Cisco's over on the east side. A little Mexican food joint, been there for a long time. It's got a pretty unique story behind it, and their migas plate is fantastic. It's where we'd always go after church with the family to grab a good bite to eat, head back home nice, fat, and happy.
Nice. I'll have to try out the migas plate too. I've been there one time. I passed it forever and thought it was an Italian restaurant with the name Cisco's and kind of the art on the door, but ended up there for breakfast with some guys last year, and it was like a wolf breakfast or something named after an animal. It was delicious.
I've only ever gotten the migas, so
really, yeah, I'll have to try it out.
Take your word for it.
Oh, it's great spot, and that is on East 6th.
I think it's East 6th. Yeah, I don't know the cross street, but it's right there on the corner.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty close to 35. Great spot. Awesome. So, Landan, I know you're heavily involved in the real estate investing space in the Austin area. What specifically do you do, and what's this company you just started?
Sure. So, the company's called North Star Brokerage and Advisory. There's a nice little story behind the name North Star, which I can get into in a second. But our core focus is helping investors buy and sell RV and mobile home parks. We do a lot of utilization with the 1031 exchange for these types of owners. And really, we got started in this space by accident. My background is in selling net lease retail all across the country. Mm-hmm. So before I'd ever even thought about selling an RV or a mobile home park, I'd sold 100 plus single tenant properties in 21 states, Starbucks, Dollar Generals, Walgreens, things like that. And what I noticed was that a lot of the people who were purchasing those properties from us were doing so with a 1031 exchange. So they sold some multifamily property out in California at a 3% cap rate, rolled the funds over into something here in Texas where they were now clipping a 6% return and doubling their income for a now fully passive investment. Mm-hmm. So we found ourselves doing a lot of 1031 exchange rep. And thankfully now I had the idea to look a little bit further upstream and figure out where that pipeline of money was coming from. You know, you can read all the articles about this that you want, but there's the baby boomer generation is sitting on, I think the number's somewhere between 20 or $30 trillion worth of wealth that's expected to change hands as these people retire, sell their businesses, sell their real estate, and ultimately pass away and hand it off to the next generation. So for the portion of that money, that equity that's tied up in real estate, and especially if it's been owned for a very long time, those people are going to have major tax consequences when they sell. So the solution to avoid paying those taxes is to do a 1031 exchange and purchase a different property. That way you maintain your cash flow. And with the type of properties that I was selling, it allowed you to get a property it had no landlord responsibilities. The tenant paid for the taxes, insurance, maintenance, and upkeep in addition to the rent. So the landlord just collects net checks every single month. When I was looking in the market, I started looking, okay, where's this money going to come from? Is it going to come from the multifamily group? Is it going to come from investors who own land? Maybe it's been in their family for a couple generations. Where's this money going to be coming from? So when I was doing a little bit of research, I found this nice chart that showed it was a CPPI chart, Commercial Property Price Index. It broke down different asset classes and how they've appreciated over a 10-year period on average. So it breaks it down to between retail, multifamily, industrial, land, all these different things, and it shows the trend line over a 10-year period. And it did about what you'd expect. Everything goes up and to the right to varying different degrees. Retail goes up and to the right pretty modestly. Industrial, did pretty well. Hospitality, it showed that. But the one asset class that had appreciated more than everything else was mobile home parks and RV parks. It was right there at the top of the list. It was the highest one. So I thought, well, that's interesting. I double-clicked on that, did a little bit of research on that industry, and what I quickly learned was that about 75% of parks on the ground operational right now in Texas are owned by what we call mom and pops, just single owner.
75%.
About 70. Yeah, I think the number is 74, but 74% are owned by people with one asset, and that's it. They're not portfolio owners. They're not private equity guys. They're mom and pops. I said, well, that's interesting. I'm very used to working with mom and pops, and that's a pretty attractive situation to be in. At the same time, there's a lot of private equity money moving into the space. A lot of new groups or syndications or funds are being put together to chase these types of properties. So right off the bat, you've got a historically older owner who's had a property for a very long time, very fragmented market. You've got a developing pool of buyers over on this side. And in the brokerage world, you work and try to figure out a way that you can marry those two together and make transactions happen. So that's what we started doing. The idea was to approach it from the 1031 exchange perspective, say, hey, Mr. Owner, I see you've owned this property for 25 years. It's probably tripled, if not quadrupled in value since then. Your basis is probably zero. If you sold it today, you'd pay maybe a quarter to a third of your money in taxes to the government. Nobody wants to do that. You'd also lose your income, but you would sell yourself out of a job, which probably sounds appealing. Hey, let me propose a different solution to you where we can sell your property for you, your park. We can run the 1031 exchange process as we've done dozens of times before, and we can put you into a property that I know very, very well, which is usually going to come with a 20-year lease, absolute triple net lease structure, and a corporate guarantee that's going to make your golden years a lot more enjoyable. Of course, we've done this a whole bunch of times. We've got case studies, we've got examples, we've got testimonials. We put all this stuff in front of people and actually make this possibility real. And then if we get to sign the business, we can go out and execute on it. So that was working out very well, still is. And what we realized pretty quickly was that there's not a lot of people doing what we do, and certainly not at the level that we want to do it, with the level of sophistication, availability of data, which is very sparse in this industry. There's no like CoStar or MLS that exists for these types of properties. So most of the people who have data built it themselves, and that's exactly what we've done. And we've now, I guess the last 2 years running, we've got one of the largest market shares of parks sold in Texas. Now that we've started North Star, the goal is to continue entrenching ourselves in the Texas market, because that's where everybody who's investing in parks, and especially if they're crossing state lines, they want to be in Texas, they want to be in Florida, they want to be in Arizona, they want to be in these southern markets. So we want to continue sinking our roots deep in the Texas market, get a pretty dominant market share here, and then ultimately start crossing state lines, which I'm very excited about because that's what I've done for the first half of my career.
Hey guys, this is Jordan Moorhead here, and I wanted to ask if you could do a huge favor for me. If you could go leave a review for this podcast wherever you're listening to it, that would really help me get this into the hands of other people that are interested in information about Austin real estate investing, and I'd be able to help more people. Thanks, guys.
That's awesome. So I really like the done for you almost package you have there for the mom and pop owner. It's odd because I'm buying mobile home parks, and that's how we met. I was looking at, hey, I want to connect with more brokers that are selling mobile home parks. But the thought is, hey, let's build this big portfolio of mobile home parks and eventually change it into net lease properties that aren't a lot of work, but you can build the equity in the mobile home park space. So as far as the appreciation in mobile home parks, that's such an interesting fact. Is that because cap rates have compressed and rents have just gone way up on them? So the NOI has gone up, cap rates have gone down.
Yeah, it's
compared to where they were in the past, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blend of a lot of factors, right? Like your cap rates, I don't care what people say, they are very closely tied to the availability of debt.
Yeah.
And on the mobile home park side, you get a lot more favorable debt solutions than you would on the RV park side because you get Fannie Freddie debt, whereas the
Yeah.
SBA doesn't get that. And you see a lot of people funding those purchases with SBA money.
Yeah. 10%. And a lot of people don't know that SBA is expensive. It's prime plus 2, right?
Yeah, people are learning that right now that it's very expensive, especially the people that rate locked when they were in, or I guess erected their loan in the COVID era when rates were 0, but they've got a floating rate or an adjustable rate or a maturity coming due. And now they're like a guy I was talking to just this week. He locked, and it's at a park in Austin too. He's locked in at a 3.85 on his park.
Wow.
He's got a rate adjustment that he paid for, or a rate adjustment in 2026, but he paid to have it capped at 4.75. And he was saying that people at the time were telling him, don't pay for that extra cap. Rates are never going to go that high again. But he paid for it. Very grateful that he did, because now he's got a 4.75 lock for the next 5 years after that. In a market that today people are probably doing a loan on a park like that between 7.5% and 8%.
Yeah.
So it's an inch. I mean, it's a huge factor, but I'd say what a lot of it has to do with is just how expensive housing is. That's allowed park owners to effectively raise rents. I mean, it's just the supply and demand component of it. So rents have gone up tremendously in most markets in Texas, and there's a lot of new constraints being put on park developers, new standards around the actual construction of the park itself. So subdivision standards, meaning that the actual homes need to have curb cuts as opposed to just, the road stops and the dirt starts type of a deal.
In Texas, that's wow.
In Texas, yeah. There's rumor, I actually haven't even verified this, but there's a park owner who developed a park up in Williamson County who told me that they just enacted some new regulations around how do I say this? The requirements for a new park being put on the ground was 1 pad per acre, which historically we're looking at parks that are between 8 and 10 pads per acre. So it's effectively killed development, which in certain municipalities to certain local legislative bodies, that's the goal. They don't want more RV parks. They don't want more mobile home parks. It's a low income housing option, so they can't just get rid of it. So what do? They find different ways to prevent people from coming in and developing parks. And we see this in some municipalities have straight up moratoriums, meaning no more parks can get built. Some of them, TCEQ specifically, Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, I think it is, are raising the requirements around septic capacity and water capacity, and in some cases 4x what it was the year before.
Wow.
They're requiring any new septics to be able to accommodate 3 to 4 times what the old standards were. So if you're grandfathered in, you're fine. You don't have to retrofit it. But if you're trying to build a new park, you need to prepare for 2, 3, and in some cases 4x the same capacity or the septic capacity for the same number of lots. So it's got a lot more expensive to own, or I should say expensive to develop and expensive to expand. Not even to mention the property taxes and the insurance, which are absolutely causing major issues in this space right now.
Well, that's a big reason why I've been told a lot of municipalities don't want these mobile home parks, is because they're denser and because they don't pay as much of property tax, because there's no improvement on the property. I mean, that's just common sense when you think about it that way of course, these mobile homes are barely paying anything in property tax. And then the mobile home park owner, their property tax is much lower because they're getting taxed on the land. So it's terrible for the city. It's everybody's everyone's trying to fight to stay alive, right? The park owners trying to keep their taxes down, justifiably so. I mean, if you don't own any of the improvements, then why should you get taxed for those improvements? Yeah. What we've seen is that the municipalities are starting, and I don't know whether this is an official formula, if they put this on the website, if this is the actual conversation that goes down, but there's plenty of park owners that think that this is true. It's pretty easy to do some quick and dirty math to back of the napkin math valuation of a park, right? You got your number of pads that are rented, you got your lot rate, you attributed an expense ratio onto that number, and you can generally get in the ballpark of how much money this park is making within reason. Municipalities seem to be, the tax man specifically, seem to be starting to value these parks based more on the amount of revenue that they're generating. And one of the guys I was talking to, he's a local owner here, made a really good point that
put it in perspective for me and said, yeah, I don't understand. If I own this park, I own the dirt, I own the utilities and the infrastructure. I don't own any of these rigs. I don't own any of these homes. I don't own these tiny houses in some cases, but I'm being taxed as though that I did, because you can do the back of the napkin math. You can assume that I'm doing $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue, and you can back into the valuation that way. But he said, if there's a guy right next door to me who's got a plumbing business and he's operating out of a building that's a $500,000 building, but he's doing $5 million in revenue, you're not going to go tax that business owner based off of what his business is doing. You're going to tax him based on the structure. So he's like, I can't for the life of me figure out where these guys are getting these numbers, because the numbers line up very clearly with what the park is doing based on an income approach. But that's not the way that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not the way that our property tax system was designed.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. But
there's a lot of them. Williamson County, I'm just watching the papers because there's a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you got into the mobile home park business because you saw that people were making a lot of money off these mobile home parks, and you could turn them into a triple net client. That's extremely smart. What have you learned about the mobile home park and RV park business so far that you've said, wow, I'm glad I've got into this, or I didn't know this was going to happen, or I didn't know this would be part of the deal? Because I'm assuming, and I've never bought triple net property, but I'm assuming they're much different assets, and the sellers are both different, and it's just a different game altogether.
Have you wanted to be part of GoBundance, the tribe of millionaires, but just haven't hit that millionaire status yet? Well, now you can, not even being a millionaire, by joining our new program, GoBundance Emerge. My name's Jamie Gruber, creator of GoBundance Emerge and member of the GoBundance community. And now you can join. GoBundance.com/emerge. GoBundance.com/emerge. Use code Jordan for $100 off this 12-week goal-setting program and mastermind that'll propel you to being a whole life millionaire.
It is a completely different ball game. I'm a very analytical person. My background is in finance, and that's what I know. So in my mind, and the way I've always run my business is I should be able to put everything into a spreadsheet, quantify it some way, attribute a value to it, and then that's how I've always run my business. Very easy to do that in the triple net space. In the RV and mobile home space, it's almost impossible. People always ask me, hey, what's the average price per pad you're seeing right now? Or what's the average cap rate that you're seeing? And my response is, my most honest response to even people that are 20 years in the space or my senior in every capacity is like, I have no idea. Because we sell a lot of parks and we underwrite a lot more parks than that. And it's still almost impossible to nail down exactly where the market is going to perceive the value on this.
Sure.
There's the geographical considerations, there's the actual infrastructure itself, and what type of a value do you attribute to that? The demand is another thing that's really tough to quantify, especially when these parks are relatively easy to build outside of the legislative component. They're very easy to build. And if you look at the numbers, in 2018, there was a report that Horizon put out that showed that in Texas, there was about 2,100 RV parks specifically operational in the state of Texas. Well, we've seen this huge boom of development. And now in our internal system, we're tracking just over 3,800 parks in Texas.
So it's almost doubled.
It's an 80% increase. It's almost doubled.
Wow.
That has huge impacts on the current park owners. It has huge impacts on people that are building parks. So you might have a park that in a vacuum, it would be, let's just make something up, 8% cap rate deal, $50K per pad. Most people would agree that that's right. But if 3 of your neighbors go in and build parks on their property, completely saturate the market, give your renters the optionality of where they want to stay, it's a race to the bottom in terms of how much you can actually pay there. That obviously changes your revenues. That obviously changes your value. And there's these pockets that exist all across Texas, where you can see that everybody had the same great idea at the same time. So everybody came in, they brought in their paving crew, they brought in their electrician, they put down utilities and put up a sign, called it a day, to varying degrees of niceness and quality. But then you can see that in this market where the population hasn't 2x, hasn't 3x, maybe it's gone up 5% year over year, which is pretty aggressive in most instances. You go from a market where, I'll use Victoria, Texas as a perfect example, even though there's better ones. Victoria, Texas is a small market. There's not that many people there. It's not very geographically large. And there's outside of oil and gas, there's not a lot of people that are moving there on a consistent basis. It's a boom and bust market to a degree.
RV parks probably work well there.
RV parks have historically worked very, very well there, as well as mobile home parks. And as long as that number was relatively finite and constrained, it was predictable. The major swings in occupancy and rental rates being tied to oil and gas production. For whatever reason, you've had a couple of, I affectionately call them tourists, or people that are just getting into the space for the first time. They've caught the bug, they've heard the buzz, they're excited, and they want to get into it for the first time. And since there's not a lot of data out there, they're not really making data-driven decisions. But that market, there was somewhere between 850 and 900 total pads in the entire market pre-COVID. There's closer to 1,500 pads now because some people have come in, and the overall occupancy in the market at the time was hovering between 65 and 70%, depending on where you were. So it's not like they were really busting at the seams and could take on new parks. This one particular guy comes in, builds a Class A park. It's all concrete, everything, which is good for RV at least. I think it was 220 spaces.
Wow.
So one park alone increased the total number of pads by about 30%, not to mention the other parks that have been built there too. Well, that's an example where in a very small market, a lot of changes have happened, increased the total pads. Everybody's occupancy has gone down. Everybody's rates have gone down. Nobody benefits from it. That's the same type of thing that's happening in a lot of different markets throughout the country for sure. But in Texas specifically, that's the type of thing that's happening, and that's what's causing either your 20-year plus owners to scratch their head for the first time and realize, hey, how do I actually get people in here? We've always been 99+% occupied. Now we're fighting for the high 80s% occupied. Or it's someone who bought a park, they got ZIRP era debt, 0% interest rate debt. They bought it when revenues were high, which is the COVID era, and now revenues have gone down, cost of debt's gone up, and they're sitting here looking at this asset that's worth 30% less than they bought it for, and their payments are going up. So it's like there's a lot of this stuff that is proving to be problematic, but at the same time, it's like anything else. There's a strategic component to it. If you go in smartly, if you pick your markets selectively, if you know who your customer is going to be, and you make decisions based off of that, not based off of the hype. There's people I know right now that are starting with less than 5 parks. A couple of them on their first park. A couple of them have 2 or 3 in the pipeline. These guys are actively getting new parks under contract and closing them. And their goal is to have a 10 to 20 park portfolio throughout the state of Texas that they can eventually roll on up to private equity or to a larger operator, similarly to what we saw with self-storage over the last couple of decades.
Yep.
And probably more so on the MH side than the RV side. But all that's going on right now. So like they say, how do you make an omelet? You got to crack some eggs. Well, I'm watching these eggs getting cracked right now. It's not good for everybody. But for the people who are taking a long-term perspective and are approaching it the right way, making data-driven decisions, making smart investments, those are the guys who we're going to see make generational wealth for themselves over the next 5 to 10 years.
And I've got some questions about that too, because I know you're seeing who's being successful and who's not. I've experienced that the mobile home park business, I don't own any RV parks, but the mobile home park business is just that. It's a business. Whereas, if you can buy, we're sitting in a studio that's owned by a property management company here in Austin. You can buy duplexes, single families, apartment complexes, and there's professional property management that's going to manage it for you. And it's pretty easy. If you don't get a good one, you just fire them and find another one. There's 1,000 out there. With the mobile home, and I don't know anything about the RV park business, but I don't know of many professional property management companies for the mobile home park space. And I know of even fewer that have a good reputation. It seems like it's more of a business. And again, I've experienced it's much more of a business. It's much more like it's diagonal income almost. It's not vertical. You're not working it every day, but it's not passive or it's not completely horizontal. It's somewhere in between. It's a business you need to pay attention to. How many of these people are you seeing that start in the RV park and mobile home park business that have watched a podcast or read a book or something and thinking that it's good passive income? Is that a lot of them, or is it?
There's a lot of that. So I've
Really?
never done any of these, whether it's like the RV or mobile home park mastermind or group or anything like that. I know a lot of them. I've seen a lot of their content. I think like anything else, it's a road paved with good intentions.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's serving a purpose, but at the same time, we see a lot of those people who've just joined up a mastermind group, looked at some guy on a presentation board putting numbers into a spreadsheet about how to reverse engineer an RV park, and the path to profitability is XYZ. Well, that's great. Again, in a spreadsheet, but this is the real world where you do have to deal with regulatory changes. You do have to deal with the actual management operations day to day, which you're running a hospital. You're basically running a hotel.
Yep.
Because you've got check in, check out constantly, while also fixing problems, and you're dealing with tenants who, varying degrees of their own sophistication or how easy they are to deal with. But there's a lot of that, and I want to provide a platform where people can make good decisions, whether it's on the development side because they're in maybe a little bit of a desert or a high need area when it comes to this type of stuff, or to stay away from particular areas because, hey, we've got 1, 2, 3 tracts of land right now that's got active permits that are less than 6 months old to build the same type of thing. Yeah. So it's our goal to try to provide the best guidance on people that we can on the building side or on the acquisition side so that they can make smart investment decisions. But at the same time, it's also help them find the best tools, resources, people, and teams so that they can actually run a business when it's time to do that. And that goes back to property management, which you're spot on. There's not a lot of really, really strong property management options that you can choose from. I mean, in Texas alone, there's a handful, and there's even more outside of the state of Texas who will do business in Texas. But that doesn't mean they know anything about Texas. And those guys have a really hard job because as a property manager, you're getting a flat fee based off of your performance. I've never seen a property management company come in and treat a park as if it was their own.
Yeah.
The sleepless nights, the early mornings, you're in there scrubbing the toilets by yourself. It's usually kind of a Band-Aid over a bullet hole solution. And in the market that we're in right now, where there is so much competition, there is so much change, there's so much dynamism in what's actually going on, the people that are doing the best, or I should say the parks that are doing the best, are the self-managed parks. People who are taking it seriously, are running it like a business, and are going in with their own teams, their own crew, their own hiring and firing process, their own marketing process, their own systems. It's very, very easy to identify the good operators that way. The people who buy a park, slap in a property management company, in a lot of instances, I see them changing property management companies a couple times, and there's only so many that they get to choose from before they're having to start over. But those guys a lot of them are not having a good time, and the property management companies, I have to give them some credit. They're probably doing the best that they can.
Sure.
But if you're managing a property in a market where there's a lot of new competition, there's only so many levers you can pull on to get people in your door. So marketing becomes a pretty big component in your customer acquisition process. How do you do that? What are your best channels to spend on marketing? What does your actual intake process look like? Does somebody have to call in, catch a live person, do a credit card over the phone type of deal, or can they do it from an app on their phone? Well, the apps on their phone are a lot better of a path to do that. But just 10 years ago, the phone call was king. You could easily go in, make a call, make a reservation, and then get in. But if you're that park that is still on the old school phone system, you missed the call because you were helping somebody else out, or you were out there fixing a pedestal or something. You missed that call. Well, the likelihood that you're going to call that person back and that is still going to be a client for you is low, because there's another park right down the road that they've already called, talked to somebody, or found the online booking form.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we view property management companies. And this is, I would say, more in defense of the property management company. We expect that they're going to run our business the way we would and care about it just as much as we would. But then we also expect they're going to do that for nickels and dimes, so let's call it 5% or 10% of the gross revenue. I wouldn't run that business for 5% of the gross revenue. And it just doesn't make any sense. So yes, I 100% agree that even if you're going to use a property manager, you need to manage that person very well. You have to essentially be doing half the work and just have them doing some of the operations. So maybe you're answering the phone, or maybe you're making sure everything's on track. I just feel for them for the amount of money they make and the amount of properties they need to manage to make any real money. And you need a big team. You have to pay a lot of people. It doesn't make sense to spend all your time on the one property, because then everybody else is going to be upset. So it's a hard business. And I think if you're going to get into the RV park or mobile home park business, again, not experiencing the RV park side, but you have to be ready to manage that property, or at the very least, really manage the manager.
Both are true. And I've got a lot of love for the property management side of business. I started my career in property management back in 2015 when I was still a student working while I was going to school at Baylor. And I remember having this realization at the time, which I just kind of laughed off because I was a college kid who could not have given a rip about what was actually going on the business side of things. I was there for a paycheck. I was there to do the job and then go home as quickly as I could. But I remember having this realization that of all the phone calls that I was getting, of all the stuff that I was having to deal with, it was always problems. Nobody's calling the property management company to tell them that they did a good job or to tell them to keep it up. They're calling you because you've got a problem, and you have to have the bandwidth and also the stomach in some cases just to be able to deal with that problem while you've also got the 5 other problems that you're still working on. So I wish there was a easier recommendation that I can make for people, but my best recommendation for anybody who's either in the space and trying to figure out how to maximize things or getting into the space for the first time, be ready to self-manage or be ready to quickly put a team in place that is your team, people that you trust, and they're going to run your playbook to make sure that your investment is successful. Because anytime you delegate something like that out to a third party or somebody else, you have to know and understand that the quality of work is just naturally going to go down. And if you find somebody who is loyal, you can trust them, you can rely on them, they're willing to stay later hours to work to make everything run well, keep that person, because those people are hard to find.
Absolutely. I always think if I can find somebody to do it 80% as good as I can, that's great, because I can cover the other 20% and make sure that happens. But it's extremely difficult to find somebody that really cares, because it's not their business. They don't care. So when you were in college, you worked in property management. What type of property management business were you working in? Was it residential or commercial?
Jordan Moorhead here. Really quickly, wanted to tell you a couple other ways you can keep track of us. If you want to listen to all these podcasts and ask questions, the Moorhead team on YouTube is the best place to be. And then Austin Real Estate Investors on Meetup is a great place to keep track of all of our meetups we have going on.
They were full suite. It was a great company run by a partnership, Jimmy Banks and Lisa Monroe in Waco. I still look up to them so much. They've done a lot of wonderful things for the city of Waco. So they had everything. They had industrial. They had they had retail. They were doing their own developments. The portfolio that I was personally responsible for was what we called the Baylor bubble, so student rentals. So I was dealing with students that were wanting to come in, check the spaces out, basically touring suites, doing the post move out check to make sure where are the scuffs on the walls, how much has the carpet been stained, and try to get it ready for the next person. So I learned a lot about just dealing with the people component of that. Again, nobody thinks you're doing a good job in that unless you're really just knocking it out of the park. But it taught me a lot about it taught me a lot about having to deal with the renter side of things while also having to deal with the people who own the real estate, because they wanted answers. If you didn't know how many tours that you'd showed their particular unit that week or that month, or what the feedback has been about the asking rate or what the competition in the market looked like, I mean, whether you cared or not, sometimes I cared, sometimes I didn't, but you could look like a fool pretty easily if you can't answer these questions for the investors, which are a lot of the times they're career investors, or they're somebody's parent who their kid was going there, they bought a condo, or the kid graduated, they still own the condo type of thing. On the student rental side, they want the most bang for their buck. They want the best thing that they can afford for the lowest amount of money, or in a lot of cases, it was their parents' money, so they just wanted the best thing. So it was I was there at a really interesting time because it was right after RG3 had won the Heisman. The Baylor football team was ripping, doing very well. Chip and Joanna gains were, blowing up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of excitement around Waco. Well, what that directly translated into is a lot of developers coming in, seeing all these 1930 builds, houses, or in some cases complete blocks that they could purchase for, basically dirt value, throw up these big either condos or medium rise multifamily units all throughout that area.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we looked at it, we had a massive oversaturation of the market. I was on the phone with a guy named Rock McNair, who at the time was, I guess, head of the real estate for Baylor. Not a professor, but he was actually in charge of Baylor's real estate in that particular area.
Okay.
I was talking to him one day, just trying to figure out what the heck was going on, because I thought I was just bad at my job because none of these things were renting. What he told me gave me personally some comfort, but it didn't give me comfort for the entire situation, which was that at a school like Baylor with, I think at the time, 16,000 undergrads, it's probably around the same number, there was an oversupply of roughly 5,000 beds.
Oh my gosh.
20,000 units were established and operational in this Baylor bubble, specifically designed for Baylor students. And it was significantly more than the actual amount of students that were there. But it was the same philosophy that we're seeing right now, where everybody realizes, oh, Baylor's hot. Let's get on this. Let's go build.
Mm-hmm.
What they didn't realize is that 50 other people had the exact same idea. So they start doing the exact same thing. Eventually, we reach a point of oversupply. Our rental rates, while we were there, were dropping precipitously. And unless you were just offering the cheapest of the cheap in many cases, you had to have the nicest product. Everything in the middle was having a really, really tough time to rent. And I remember this one particular landlord, he'd owned in that market for over 30 years, old dude, really, really funny guy. And he was telling me that these particular condos that he had never rented for anything less than $550 per room. It was a 4-room, I guess, condo. So it was I can't do public math, $2,200 a month. For the first time in over a decade, he had to reduce his prices when historically he'd been the lowest option because he'd never raised his prices.
Oh, wow.
So when everybody else was climbing, chasing 500, 550, 600, 650, he stayed right there at his number, never had any vacancies. And just so happened while I was there and in my time working, the market changed. Now that 550 was really expensive for the type of product that he was putting out for people. So we had to figure this all out as a 20 at the time.
Yeah, it's never fun to have that conversation with the landlord either. Hey, we need to drop your prices by 20%.
I mean, right, exactly. To a degree, I didn't care because, again, it wasn't my money. I was a college student. I was more interested in what the girls were doing that weekend and what my buddies were getting into. But looking back now, it's like, oh, yeah, that was a really good learning lesson to understand, what I'm dealing with when I hire a property manager or what I potentially could be dealing with. I mean, I've got property managers for the properties that I own right now, and I'm very honest with them. It's like, hey, I understand what your job is. I used to do it. You don't have to sell me. You don't have to tell me anything that's not going on.
Just shoot it straight.
Yeah, let's just this is a partnership. We can work together for a very long time as long as you keep my property clean, keep the riffraff out, let me know what's going on. I don't need the song and dance. I just want to make sure that the mortgage on this is covered. There's a little bit of cash flow coming in off of it, and my property's poised to appreciate and not go downhill.
Yeah. Yeah, it's odd that, I mean, you probably hear it 1,000 times on different podcasts, is rents never go down. They never went down in markets that were undersupplied, or they've never gone down for the past 10 years before 2022. But we've seen it firsthand here in Austin with multifamily, the supply and demand. They built so many apartments and there was only so much demand. So rents have gone down significantly. I've dropped rents on properties I own personally. I'm in some syndications here in town where they've dropped rents 20-25%.
Oh my God.
To get to places rented.
I remember when it was a 30% increase year over year.
Yeah. And it'll all come back, eventually we'll turn it around, but it's hard to plan for stuff like that happening. And like you're talking about with the Baylor just getting way oversupply, there's only 15,000 students and suddenly there's 21,000 beds available. Nobody sees that coming. Nobody sees that happening. And really, I think having good debt, good long-term debt is the most important part, and having conservative leverage on properties is also very important. To say, hey, I only need a X% expense ratio for this. You might want to have a little extra, and you're going to be okay. Be happy. And yeah, maybe you don't get the higher cash on cash return because you had to put a little extra money down, but you're in a better spot long term when something happens. So that's unfortunate. It's interesting. Austin is the only market I've ever personally experienced where this has happened, where they've way oversupplied the market. But it's cool you went through that early on in your career and kind of saw that happen, and remember that it's a thing that does happen.
Yeah, I got to see it on a very small scale in an area that I was intimately familiar with.
Yeah.
Both it's where I lived and it's also where I worked. So seeing the same thing now happen to Austin on a grander scale, it's not surprising to me at this point, but it does make you think about how many people this is impacting.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, everybody always talks about the housing issues, typically from the renter side, right? Greedy landlords, there's not enough space, rents are too high. I get that. That's all very valid.
Yeah.
At the same time, the people who own these properties, they got to be able to afford their note. They have to be able to pay the property taxes when they inevitably increase. They've got to be able to pay the insurance when that inevitably increases. And then when rents aren't moving in that same direction, then you're getting squeezed. God forbid rents move the other way. And then now you're a landlord who's got, oh crud, I've got a problem. This was supposed to be a X yield, and now it's 1/3 X of that yield. And I'm realizing, I can't do this anymore. And you don't have to look in the ABJ or any of the local like business or real estate publications to see the impact that this is having. I mean, there was I forget the name of the principal, but the GVA guy. Do you know this story?
I've heard it. He's the big multifamily guy that lost a bunch of property, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know too much about it. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert, but he had syndicated a lot of very big multi-deals, and it had just gone completely south. And I heard he was raising money from prominent people, whether it was athletes or celebrities, whatnot. Again,
that was in North Carolina, right? GVA? Or was that in Houston?
I don't know where it's based out of, but I remember what I was reading was about their Austin assets.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember specific numbers was in this one particular portfolio or this one particular property, the outstanding debt on this portfolio, I want to say was above $200,000 per door, just in terms of debt.
Wow.
And they were estimating, broker was pontificating about what the actual value is based off of current dynamics, debt, comps, whatever, was closer to like 140, 150 per door. I'm going to get those numbers wrong if someone's listening.
Sure, I understand. Yeah.
Knock yourself out. But it was evident that there was absolutely no way that those limited partners are going to get any money back. They're going to have to do a capital call just to crawl themselves out. And if they can even do that. So I
think they got foreclosed on, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there is no limited partner anymore involved at all, unfortunately.
Not anymore. I'm sure somebody else
I laugh because I've been in the situation myself. I'm not making fun of people who lost a lot of money because I've been that guy that was the equity that was gone, and you got foreclosed on.
It can happen overnight. I mean, it's wild how quickly it happens.
I think that's people forget about that with the capital stack. Is the bank is what's called 70%. And if the property value drops by 30, 40%, the bank is the only one getting any money back. Nobody else gets any money back. Everyone else is in trouble. All their money is gone. Maybe you're saying, all these rich, greedy landlords, but they live and work in your community too, and they pay property taxes and they pay taxes, and that money is just gone forever. These people took a big risk. They thought they bet on something that was very safe and sturdy, and I think this is not meant to discourage anybody at all. Just when you're doing a deal, make sure you're doing a deal with a solid operator that's buying a solid asset in a solid area. All the dynamics check out, and they have good, safe, long-term debt. Because the people that followed that track, that had the good, safe, long-term debt, are doing okay now. But everybody that had these bridge loans, which was the only way anybody was getting deals done. Again, not to disparage anyone. Everybody was doing it. But the people that have these bridge loans are the ones that lost all their equity, and now they're they're gone. The deals are gone. But the people that had 10-year debt, thankfully, one that I'm in where the rents have gone down a lot, he had good, fixed, long-term debt. Yeah, the rents have gone down, but property's still there. It's still covering the note, still doing okay. The bridge debt where the rates went way up, it's a rough deal, rough place to be in. So just do good deals and be conservative with your underwriting.
Do good deals. That's the motto everyone should have. My advice to anybody who's looking at specifically LPing on a deal, which I think is a great way to invest.
Sure.
If you have a day job doing anything else, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you should be focusing on what's going to generate you the most amount of money, which is your profession. And LP offers you a very good avenue to invest in real estate and being able to benefit, capture the benefits of real estate ownership, tax-wise, appreciation-wise, cash flow-wise. It's all good things. But at the same time, you have a personal responsibility to yourself, your own wallet, your family, whoever else is involved, to understand what you're investing in. And if you are putting money into something and you don't have a clear understanding of what the asset is, what the values are, what the comps say, what the underlying deal is, it's either A, you haven't spent enough time making a point to understand it, that's on you, or it's B, the person who's syndicating the deal, the GP, either can't answer that or has not answered that question in their fundraising decks or in their meetings or in anything about it, which is also a big problem. You should know.
Or they don't know themselves, which is unfortunately sometimes the case.
I'm sure we could swap war stories on that too. Yeah. At the end of the day, just make smart investments. And until you know what a smart investment is, there's really no smart investment. You're rolling the dice at that point. You're trying to get lucky, which for a period of time in Austin, Texas, everybody was a genius because everybody was hitting on black, and it was fantastic. When things go the other direction, nobody's winning.
Yeah. And we'll move on here in a second. I think it's so easy to feel like as a passive investor or an LP that there's not so much due diligence to do because the sponsor's done all the due diligence. But really, you have to do extra due diligence because you need to do due diligence on the sponsor. I think that's missed a lot of times with passive investments like that. And people just say, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. Seems like he knows what he's doing. And then the money's gone. Six months later, a year later, 2 years later, whatever it is. It's unfortunate.
It is.
So, Landon, you are most focused on RV parks and mobile home parks in Texas right now. So for the RV park space, what are the things people should look for and what are things people should look out for? So what are the pros and cons of RV parks in Texas right now, and how can they find a great deal with you?
Make sure to come check out our meetup, Austin Real Estate Investors, here in Austin. That is every second and fourth Thursday of every month. We would love to see you there. Again, it's Austin Real Estate Investors. You can find it on meetup.com.
I'd say a good deal for you might be not a good deal for me. And a good deal in one particular market might not be a good deal in another market. RV parks and manufactured housing communities cater to the local market. So a park that is operational in Aransas Pass or Corpus Christi is going to have a very different renter profile than something in Austin, Texas, or something in the Hill Country, or something that is, there's so many different purposes that RV parks serve. You look at every single roadway infrastructure project that's out in the boonies. Well, there's a lot of people that have to move there and live for a period of time and do that. They're workers. Same with solar fields, same with nuclear plants, same with oil and gas market out in my hometown of Midland, Texas. You have to know who your customer is and what does that industry look like for your investment long term. Oil and gas, it's like a yo-yo. It's up and down. It's up and down. You got to make your investments accordingly. If you are somewhere out, like we were doing two deals out in just outside of Brownwood, Texas, a relatively sleepy market. It's a nice little market. It'd be consistent. It's never going to be a booming market, except for the fact that there's this massive 10-year roadway expansion project that they were going to be running right through the center of town. That was going to bring in workers for a long period of time. So if you want to be the type of park operator who's catering toward that type of clientele, well, your park should reflect that. The people that are working 12 hours a day and coming back to their rig just to sleep and then go rinse and repeat because they're there to do a job. They don't need the splash pads. They don't need the covered spaces in many instances. They need bare necessities living quarters for themselves to live. If you are like a Camp Femfo or something that is more touristy, more destination, something on the water, near the water, you're probably going to see a lot more transient folks. You're probably going to see families with kids. You maybe see retirees, and you have to build the park or purchase a park that's going to cater to that. So it really comes down to understanding the market that you want to be involved in, or the type of park that you want to own, and the type of clientele that you want to cater to, and then figure out how to be the best at that thing, as opposed to trying to do all of them at once, or just try to take in everybody at once that you can. We see a lot of people, park owners specifically, who maybe they've never really had to do this in the past, or maybe it's just not something that they've thought about, but they don't really market to any particular type of park guest or renter. You don't have to think too hard to figure out why that's a problem. If you've got the winter Texans that are coming down from Michigan because there's 3 feet of snow up there and it's 75 degrees here, they're going to come down for the winter season. They're going to bring their 2 kids and they're going to bring their dog, and they want to stay at an RV park. Well, they probably don't want to stay at the same RV park that's half filled up with man camp workers that are working on a rig. And, there's parks for that type of renter. There's parks for that type of activity. There's also the parks that the families want to stay at. So not mixing and matching where it's not productive might cost you a little bit in the short term if you have to move people out. But over the long term, your park's going to be known as like, oh yeah, that's the place where we come down on vacation because it's nice. Yeah. Or hey, this is the place where we can get the best rate. We know it's well lit when we're working 12-hour days and no one's going to break into our rig. They've got good security. You got to think about what's important to the people that you're catering to. Wi-Fi is another big one as well. Does the park have good Wi-Fi? That matters. People will leave in an instant if they have to buffer too many times.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think about how frustrated I get when my home Wi-Fi is not working and I can't leave there.
Especially if you've been working 12 hours out on whatever project, you come home and you can't use the internet. I mean, that would really grind your gears.
Yeah. And all it takes to lose that person is they call the park that's a half a mile down the road and say, hey, do you guys have working Wi-Fi? They say, yes. Great. I'll see you on the first of the month.
Yeah.
And there's no stickiness. It's not like the mobile home space where to move a house, it's a pretty big endeavor. It's not cheap and it's not overnight. With any RV or motorhome, motor coach, anything, it's as simple as driving it somewhere else. Sure. It's the benefit of it, but that's also the detriment of this type of ownership.
Yeah,
parks can clear out overnight if there's a rate change, if there's a water issue, if there's something that makes it untenable for the next 30 days, someone's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's not $10,000 to move your home.
No.
Yeah,
it's like a quarter tank of gas.
So what's the difference you see with mobile home only parks in Texas versus RV parks? Obviously, the amenities are super, super important on the RV parks. So it sounds like location is very, very important on the RV park. What changes when you switch to the mobile home park side?
It's typically more permanent residency. It's somebody, I mean, that's for a big demographic of our population. That's what home ownership looks like.
Yeah.
They buy their home. It's $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 to buy their home. They finance it however they finance it, and then they own that thing. That's their domain. So you do see a lot more longer term tenancy at a mobile home park than you would at most RV parks. You're going to have more friendly debt options. You're going to have a lot more predictability in the business that you're going to run than on the RV side. And you can expect people to stay there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You've seen, I mean, we sold a park here in Austin. It was a good sized park. It was 229 spaces over off Ben White and 183. The park is called
I know
Royal Palms. Yeah. I mean, there were people who were on their second generation at that same park.
Wow. It's a great location too, by the way.
Killer location. That was such a good deal. And the guy who I sold that for, just a really good family, he purchased that park in 1982.
Wow.
So for over 40 years, he's been the sole owner of this park. He and his family, who are the operations staff, they knew a lot of the guests. They could tell you, Sally rents this cabin. Sally was in this unit. Sally was born in that unit, or maybe she moved from over here. So you get a lot more of that. You get a lot more stories like that. And in most cases in Austin, those rents have gone up over time to where that park was tremendously valuable. When he did sell and he did a 1031 exchange, he sold that one park and then purchased 9 net lease properties.
Wow.
The numbers on it are crazy too,
Yeah.
because my NDA says I can't give specifics, but he went from the operational RV park, RV and mobile home park. It was a hybrid. Sold that, bought a portfolio of net lease properties that we hand selected and packaged together for him with a weighted average lease term of 17 years.
Wow.
Always absolute triple net. Everything was corporately guaranteed. So unless one of those companies goes under, and many of them were publicly traded, those are about as solid as you can get from a real estate perspective. It was a weighted average lease term of over 17 years, and the year one cash flow increase, cap rate, whatever you want to call it, increase was 17% higher than their previous year. So this guy, in one transaction, 10 transactions, but in one package deal, exited out of a full-time management park where he was every single day. He was on site. He was doing work. He knew every square inch of this thing. And over the course of, I think it took us maybe 4 or 5 months to get from cradle to grave on this deal, owned a well-diversified portfolio of brand new net lease properties all across the state of Texas, all in major markets, all with absolute net lease structures. And he's cash flowing more than he was before.
That's wild.
That's a wonderful case study. They don't all end up that way.
Yeah.
In most cases, people's cash flow goes down because to go from
that's what I expect, is triple net versus running a business.
But a lot of people will make that trade-off because they say, I could lose 20% of my cash flow, but I get all these other benefits as well. I'll do that deal versus selling the property, losing my cash flow, and paying 25 to 30% in capital gains taxes. So that guy in particular hit a home run. Those are the bread and butter deals. And there's truly, I don't just say this to pat myself on the back, there's very few people in the United States that could do that type of a transaction.
Yeah.
Who have the product knowledge on the net lease side, who have a very robust track record with 1031 exchanges and all the headaches and all the nuances that go along with that, as well as the product knowledge on the park side, which is we're figuring a lot out, but we know a lot and we figured out a lot and we've learned a lot, and we're putting that value back into the marketplace so that obviously we can get more business, but so people can make better investment decisions for themselves. So
that story is amazing. I mean, you're going to be able to use that with every big park owner you talk to. Hey, you want to make more money and essentially make more money and do less work, or make the same money or a little less even and do no work. That's an amazing story. Everybody gets into real estate because they want passive income. That's truly passive income, but they built this huge chunk of equity they were able to take and turn it into a tremendous amount of passive income.
Yeah, we had calculated that it would have been somewhere between $9 and $10 million in taxes that he would have been paying this last tax year.
Well, and then not only does he get more money in his pocket every month, but he just set his family up for probably generations.
Yeah. And one of the key and most valuable components of doing a 1031 exchange, we affectionately call it swap till you drop, because if this is you, Jordan, and you're the one who owns this property, if you're 79 years old today and you sell that same property, you're going to pay $9 million in taxes. If you die, which we're all going to die, it's a morbid conversation, but it's a real conversation. If you die, the very next day, your kids or your heirs, whoever gets that property, can go sell it within the same week, and they don't have to pay those taxes. They get the step up in basis, they get the tax reset, and they don't have to pay those capital gain taxes. Yeah. So for the people who are trying to think about the next generation, they are thinking about cash flow into their golden years. There's really not many better options that I can think of for people to go into with their equity through a 1031 than into a fee simple owned net lease property that eventually they are going to pass away. They are going to pass that down to the next generation. If the kids are smart, they're going to keep those properties and then keep that cash flow. What also ends up being smart at the same time is for that not to happen. The kids go their separate ways, because I know a lot of situations where inheritance doesn't work out well for all parties. But even if they decide to sell, they don't have to pay the taxes. If they decide to keep the cash flow going, it's cash flow for a long time.
Well, and the way you've structured it for these families is they've gone from a heavy operational business of a mobile home park or an RV park to something that is almost completely passive. I'm sure there's some aspects of operations that happen in triple net lease, but I don't know any of them, so I don't know them particularly myself.
I do. I can tell you for the most part, it's very nice.
Yeah.
I haven't had very many issues so
I'm
far.
sure. Yeah, that's great. That's the goal long term for me, is so help me build up a couple thousand lots of a mobile home park portfolio, and we'll trade it into some triple nets.
You're talking to the right guy. I know where your office is now, so I can bug you anytime.
We'll make it happen. So anything else more you want to add about North Star? I know it's a company you've just started. You've obviously been in the business your whole career in some way or another, but what else can you tell us about North Star and where you're going?
I can speak to the North Star name for a second, because that was not my idea. North Star was terminology that I adopted once my team started growing. And every time we added a new person, the person that we added was completely oblivious to everything that we'd already done. Our culture, the way that we speak to each other, what our goal is in the industry. So I quickly realized, oh crud, I need to keep everybody on the same track, and I need to keep everybody on the same mission. Otherwise, we're going to have, Joe Blow over here who, he wants to go conquer the world, make a bunch of money, and really be a beast. And then we've got Bob over here who just wants to make enough money where him and his wife can travel, and everyone's got their own thing. That's all fine, and I support that and I endorse that. But I realized that our company needed to have a common mission, and I kept calling it, we need to have our North Star goal. And our North Star goal, which is my goal for the company, is to build the best brokerage platform that we could for RV and mobile home park owners. We want to make it easier to buy and sell for everybody involved. Best value to the sellers, best opportunities for the buyers. So before this idea of going out on our own and starting our own company was really even baked, that's what I was talking to my team about. Those are the conversations we were having. I would tell them, hey, our North Star goal is this. You might not like what I'm doing all the time. I'm the leader of this ship. Every decision I'm making is going to try to get us closer to that goal. And every decision that I make that's getting us further away from that goal, you guys need to correct me if I don't correct myself. So when this idea of starting our own company really started to make financial sense, it started to make logistical sense, it started to be more aligned with like the cultural values of what our team was trying to do and accomplish, picking a company name was a pain. I hated the idea of Dory Real Estate Investment Services or anything like that. So I was talking to my mom on the phone one day while I was going to pick up my wife's car. I was driving in mine, and she said, well, I think you already know your name. I said, what are you talking about? She says, it needs to be North Star, because that's all you've been talking about when you're talking about growing this team and growing whatever you are trying to build here. And I said, that is a no-brainer. So we adopted that, and we've implemented it into every single thing that we do. So within our team, every single person has a specific goal. That's their North Star goal. My goal is to go bring in business. It's to negotiate deals, and it's to put out fires when they inevitably arrive. That's a completely different goal than in my transaction coordinator, than my agents, than my research team. They've all got their own North Star goal, which is, at the end of the day, that's what you're focused on. And if that's what you're focused on and successful in, everybody else around you succeeds. We also put it out for our clients as well. These projects are so different. These parks are so unique. They all have their different quirks, and they've got development potential, or they've got a hybrid component to it, or they've got a restaurant attached to it. We have to treat every single one of these deals differently. But we've realized now the most important thing we can do is in our first conversations with the owner is say, hey, if we're going to work together, if you're even going to consider using us, we need to understand clearly what your North Star goal is. Meaning, in 6 months from now, or however long it takes, when we shake hands, the deal is done, you've told us we've done a great job or a bad job, did we accomplish your North Star goal? Because I can promise you over the next 6 months, Mr. Owner, that this is going to be a hairy process. There's going to be a lot of headaches. There's going to be a lot of the unexpected. There's going to be a lot of surprises. We might have 1, 2, 3 different buyers before we actually get a deal done. You need to be ready for the headaches. You need to be ready for me to tell you, hey, this needs to be how this next step goes. You need to trust my advice on this. You need to listen to me, because I've done this before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but trust me on this. So it's defining that North Star goal for the client. And then at any point along the way, when things start to go sideways, things start to look too good, whatever the instance may be, we always bring them back to, if we need to, hey, remember you hired us because you wrote on this piece of paper, your North Star goal is to sell this property before the end of the year and accomplish X, Y, Z, because that's going to allow you to go do whatever you want to do with your life after that.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't define that with you pretty early on in the conversation, the success rate of this whole business relationship goes down a lot. But if I can align my entire team, which is 6 people at this point, behind that goal that you've got, your success rate goes up tremendously. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. Because in the reality, I don't know what the exact numbers are. I can give you a career average, but about half of the deals that we ever sign up and try to work with someone on end up closing or fail to close for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
It was an environmental study that came back dirty. The deal died. Something changed with the seller's family dynamics. Plans changed. They got to go a different route. There was instances of fraud in the underwriting and that you didn't disclose that. There's someone died. We had a client die halfway through a transaction.
Oh, wow.
So all these different things happen. That's life. Mm-hmm. It's our goal now to keep everybody aligned with that North Star goal. And fortunately enough, that's a pretty easy concept for everybody to kind of gather around and support. So from the moment that we talk to somebody on the phone the first time or evaluating a business relationship or taking on a listing or an assignment, the first thing we do is define what that North Star goal is for the owner and execute based off of that.
That's awesome. That's a really cool concept that I don't, obviously with a lot of sales, it's just assumed the goal is just to sell and cash out. But you dive a little deeper and you say, hey, why are you looking to sell? Why are we even talking here? What's the long-term goal with this? And I'm a big goal setter, so I like the concept there. Landan, this has been awesome. Anything else you want to add for mobile home park or RV sellers or buyers that are in the Texas market right now?
All I would say to anybody who owns or is thinking about owning, buying, selling, it really doesn't matter. Educate yourself. I can be a great resource to a lot of people in this industry, but I'm not the only resource.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people out there who either do exactly what I do, maybe they just do it a little bit differently, or maybe they're tangentially in this same space, but for different reasons in a different avenue. Doesn't matter. There's so many people out there that are knowledgeable about this space. If you're someone who's thinking about putting your own dollars and your own time behind this as an endeavor, go research the industry, figure out who the thought leaders are, figure out what works and what doesn't. Go put your 2 feet on the ground in a bunch of different parks, see what you like, see what doesn't, see what you don't like, talk to the owner, figure out what works and what doesn't. And the reality is, if 99 people who are interested in owning a park hear that, or excuse me, if 100 people who hear me say that, 99% aren't going to do it. They're going to do whatever they were going to do anyway. 1% might actually take that seriously, but that 1% is going to be better off in the long term. Not because of me, but just because they educated themselves before they made a financial decision.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. There's so much to learn too.
We've all got to learn.
So Landan, what is the best way to get a hold of you? What's the best way to learn more about your company? Do you have any links or social media profiles that people might check out?
Yeah, we've got it all. I would say I probably spend the most time on X.
Okay.
But the best way to find us is just our website. It's the letters N as in Nancy, star, B as in boy, A as in apple.com, N-Star BA, North Star Brokerage Advisory.
Okay.
That has links to everything. That's where we post our deals. That's where we post white papers, articles, anything that might be relevant. When this podcast comes out, we'll find a place on the website to stick it. That's the best place to start.
Awesome. And we'll have all those links in the show notes of the podcast too for everybody. Landan, thank you so much for coming on here today. Always fun to talk, and hope we can do a deal together here soon.
I look forward to it, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Have a great day here.
Thank you. You too.